To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
A very warm welcome to you, Minister.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for coming here and sharing your thoughts with us. I'm sure it will be very, very enlightening. Given,
I hope so.
Given the fact that you are very innovative and forward-looking minister, and your ministry is doing some excellent work. So this subject, as we were just discussing before we came, is about governance and the fact that governance of how is governance coping up with disruptive technology. And your ministry is at the forefront of many of these things. So tell us first a little bit about how, with the so many disruptive technologies which are now staring us in the face, we'll come to blockchain, etc. later. What is the government's thinking on how disruptive technologies, which are sort of every day there's something new, how does disruptive technology be tackled at the government level?
So thank you, Sourav, and thank you for having me over this evening. I'm sure it's been a long day and I don't want to bore anybody, and so I'll try and keep it brief. Look, I think, it's obvious, and I think most of you are aware that technology and innovation in the whole internet space has often, not often, it's true, has led the way, and regulation and laws and policies have, in a sense, followed. So innovators and innovations have set the pace, the scorching pace, and you can see the startup innovation ecosystem in India today is growing at the pace that it is. And laws and rules and regulations have lagged. And this is true not just for India, it's true for the US, it's true for all over the world. And for much of the last decade, the big tech companies have escaped scrutiny and regulation because they were always seen as technology innovators. And technology has always been seen through the prism of doing good, changing business, altering business models, improving people's lives. And so therefore there has been a sense that governments have really held back from too much interference, too much intervention and or scrutiny. Some of those things haven't turned out to be that great, and I'm sure we will discuss this. And I think going forward, it is clear from our ministry's point of view and the government's point of view that while we want to make sure that the internet and the technology ecosystem is there and does well and continues to create opportunities and transform people's lives, we also want to make sure that the negatives, the user harm, the criminality, the other aspects of the internet that somehow don't get as much airplay and press as the good parts, also are in a sense regulated, but in a manner where the overall momentum and the positivity of technology is not in any way retarded or muted.
So yeah, so that's a very delicate balance which the government and ministries like yours will always have to sort of tread. You have done already interesting work on allowing blockchain and doing interesting work on the blockchain. CBDC has been announced in the budget as well. Now, tell us a little more about how blockchain, the kind of use cases which you're looking at in terms of facilitating them from the government side.
So in the government, our view on this, and as I'm sure is the view for most people who are participants in the technology ecosystem, is that blockchain and the distributed ledger architecture represents a way for the internet's next phase, in a way, if you want to call it that. They call it Web 3.0. We are living in Web 2.0. And so in a sense, that transformation of the internet, that jump to Web 3.0 is something that India's entrepreneurs and India's startup ecosystem should be leading. That is clearly our objective. But of course, Web 3.0 and the whole new world of the internet around the blockchain is a very different cup of tea. From a point of view of regulating, from a point of view of all of these issues of user harm that I just talked about earlier. So I don't think this is going to be a jump that is going to be sans any safety nets. So at the ministry, at the government, it is our job and our mission to make sure that that leap, that transformation that we make is driven by our entrepreneurs, driven by our startup and innovation ecosystem, but the safety net for the consumers of the internet, and there are going to be 1 billion consumers in India very soon, consuming the internet and consuming services and products of the internet, that there is a clear safe net of safety, so that the internet in India, as a consumer experiences it, is always open, safe and trusted, and accountable. So these broad principal issues are what is guiding the approach that we have to rule making, law making, and policy making.
And that will extend obviously to blockchain as well.
Absolutely.
And the,
And the entire Web
3.0.
3.0, yes.
Now, you spoke about innovation, startups. Now, that brings us to the point, Mr. Minister, of Young India. Now, this government has been very, very vocal about Gen Z, Young India, the aspirational India. And that's actually happening in many of the initiatives which you and your government have taken. How does one then justify that, we are debating, and through the course of the today's discussions, some of these panels actually came up with this whole thing about young India being a bit disillusioned with the kind of time and the delays which are being taken and the confusion around Web 3.0 and regulation. And many of them actually looking at moving abroad. And that's a kind of a brain drain which is constantly now being talked about in connection with Web 3.0. How do you look at that?
First of all, I don't think anybody should move abroad. I mean, I think this is the best place to be at. This is the fastest growing startup and innovation ecosystem in the world. Our country has received more FDI and investments into the startup ecosystem than any other nation in the world. We have an energy today and a confidence about the future unlike anything that I have seen. And I have spent a few decades, I'm an old man now, but I've spent a few decades in technology, and I've never seen anything like this in India. So this is not something that is to be scoffed at. It is a huge inflection point in the growth of India's story and the growth of the Indian entrepreneur. And the Indian entrepreneur and the Indian startup today is a world respected entity. So if somebody wants to leave and go somewhere else, I will request him or her not to do that, because that wouldn't be a smart thing to do. In terms of the impatience and the sense that maybe our approach to the blockchain and the crypto aspect of policy making is slow, I don't think so. I would rather characterize this as being measured, deeply involved, with a lot of public consultations and making the right moves with the right amount of knowledge and consultation and engagement with the principal stakeholders of the industry and of the ecosystem. And I'll give you an example. I mean, there is a personal data protection bill, as you know. And the reason that we are being very, very careful about going out there and legislating that bill is that we want to be 100,000% sure that that bill or any other legislation does not impact the momentum of our startup and innovation ecosystem by even a little bit. So I don't think there is any slowness. I've never been accused of being slow or inactive. I'm just joking. But I think you should take this as more of being very measured, very involved in ensuring anything that we do is future-proof. On the issue of crypto, while I know there is a lot of frustration, and I get a lot of that when I go through airports and have 20 plus something youngsters come and tell me that I'm destroying their future or whatever it is. But here's the thing. I mean, the whole world is a bit puzzled about how to deal with crypto. It's not something that is unique about India. The world's regulators, including the financial regulators, are deeply concerned about what the effect of crypto will be on the overall macroeconomy, on the power of the central bank to issue currencies, this disintermediation of the currency system as we know it since post-World War II is not a small, trifling thing. It's a huge structural departure from how the world has looked at currency and issuances of currency. So I think a little bit of patience is probably warranted in terms of policy making in this area. If somebody was asking me for an urgent response, it would have been a ban. As you know, that there is enough of a school of opinion that the whole category of crypto should be banned. But I think this government has taken a very positive, progressive step. They believe in the future of the digital economy and the digital payment and the blockchain. And so we will create this as a consequence of a lot of consultation, and the pace for this should be set by the process of that consultation rather than any instant gratification that any wannabe unicorn is interested in or wants.
No, that's a point very well taken, Mr. Minister. The point basically is that you have now a clear distinction, which the government has also made, between blockchain, which it is obviously in favor of, and several times that has been reiterated. There is the CBDC, which therefore is coming out from the RBI. But then there is the whole issue of crypto assets. Now, that is where the whole question mark arises. Do you see, in this context, a clear direction being given by the government? We spoke of a ban. The Reserve Bank, in fact, has been very, very vocal about a ban. Now that, obviously is not probably going to happen, at least not from the indications. What are your thoughts on the way the crypto asset part of it will be sort of looked at by the government?
No, look, the rupee obviously is not a fully convertible currency, and therefore there are restrictions on how you can use the rupee to buy assets that are non-rupee assets. And the RBI has laid down many ways of doing that. The LRS, the Liberalized Remittance Scheme, is the easiest way for an individual to invest in any asset he or she wants. And there is no disqualification from anybody owning a crypto asset as part of his portfolio of assets. What the budget and the tax code has just announced is the capital gains and the taxation regime for an asset that is now only entered into the vernacular of the tax inspector now. I mean, it didn't exist 2 years ago. So there's nothing surprising about, and so there's some conversation of whether the tax rate is high, low. These are things that evolve over time. And as, in anything that is unknown or less understood, usually the instinct is to tax it at a high rate. And then as people become comfortable with it, those tax rates obviously moderate. But there is no ban on owning crypto assets. There is clearly a recognition that the digital virtual asset is a category of assets going forward, whether it's an NFT, whether it's a crypto, whether it's something else in the future, that these are things that people will start accumulating through the LRS or any other way. And those gains on those assets need to be taxed and offered for taxation, and those are the rates.
This is a very significant point you're making, Mr. Minister, because I think that whole clarity is not still very much there.
I don't. To be very honest, I don't understand what clarity, because it's reasonably commonsensical to me. If I can own real estate in New York, if I'm a businessman in Mumbai or a financial investor in Mumbai, and I have the way to use $250,000 a year to invest in real estate in the US or UK or wherever, I can use that $250,000 to invest in the stock markets, US stock markets. I can use it for crypto assets, virtual assets, as the case may be. So I don't quite understand when people say this is not clear. It is clear as much as common sense can make it clear. But maybe nobody put it out in a typed note and put it in front of people. So
probably the regulatory structure is what they are still not very clear about.
No, I think on that, I think there is clarity after the budget that if you are looking for a domestic crypto asset, there will be only one, and that will be the RBI issued CBDC, and that will be the digital rupee. And as that rolls out, the way the issuance of that, the mining of that, the minting of that, the buying of that will become clear from the issuer, the RBI. So frankly, from my point of view, I think the landscape is very clear. It's very absolutely clear. There are some questions around existing crypto exchanges, crypto brokers, P2P types of trades on cryptos, what happens, who regulates them, and I think that will evolve.
And coming back to the whole issue of disruptive technology in general, Mr. Chandrasekhar, I think there is so much happening around AI, ML, blockchain, and is one of them.
Absolutely.
What how is the government then looking at, and there are many other ministries involved in it. Is there an interministerial discussion which regularly happens in terms of regulating or governing some of those? What's the governance structure there?
No, look, so I think, first of all, I think your audience and your viewers will need to understand that the basic law that today regulates the cyberspace and the Indian internet is it's called the IT Act. Right. And the IT Act was enacted in 2000. So it's 22 years old. So I think you would agree that 22 years in the internet age is like 3 centuries or 4 centuries, 5 centuries, whatever. So I think it is clear in our minds, and I think to any observer's mind, that we need a new digital law. And a new digital law that addresses not just all of the opportunities and the rule making around those opportunities, but also address the user harm issues and a lot of the other areas around the internet that we don't have necessarily good rules for. For example, the openness. How do we ensure that the App Store duopoly is addressed? How do we make sure that the search engine monopolies are addressed? How do we make sure that these new invasive devices like the glasses are dealt with? So there is, on the device side, on the technology side, on the intermediary side, and then there's this whole new emerging phenomenon of AI and algorithms and ethical use of that, high risk use of that. So all of these areas that we believe are areas that directly impact the consumer and need to be, in a sense, if not regulated, but at least need to have proper global standard rules for how intermediaries conduct themselves around these areas, or manufacturers, as the case may be, need to be framed. And my own instinct is that it will need a new law to do that. Anything now is all very bolt-on, retrofitting type of approach. So we have an IT Act which is 22 years old. We have done some intermediary rules. We will do some cybersecurity rules. We will do some privacy rules. But they are all going to be sort of retrofitting it, and it's all stopgap, band-aid type of an approach. And if anybody has read the IT Act, you know that the word internet does not even exist on the IT Act. So it does not even talk about the word internet. And so, that is how the vintage of the Act. So I think the move forward is, look at new digital law, establish a data governance framework, because we are an extremely data-intensive country now with over 1 billion Indians who are going to go online and be connected to the internet very shortly. The intensity of the public cloud, the expansion of the public cloud is going to be very, very fast in the next 2-3 years. So we are going to be sitting on huge amounts of data. So a data governance framework, a data management institutional framework, new digital law, data protection law, these have to be seen as pieces of an overall overarching sort of jurisprudence that will allow both startups and innovation to continue to grow and prosper, as well as protect the user and the citizen from all of the risks and ills of the internet.
Very, very significant. So how far are we from that structure, Mr. Minister? Because these are very important as we even talk about the metaverse now. That's and the threats and problems and the benefits associated with that.
No, so I will say this. I won't give you a precise date. I will tell you that we are fairly far along on our process of thinking and architecting this whole thing. Very early on, the Prime Minister has already laid out that his vision for Digital India is to intensify the digitization of the country. And he has also said that the objective for policymaking should be that the internet should always be open. It should be safe and trusted and accountable to its users and consumers. So I think without giving too much away, we have thought this very deeply. We have made significant progress on this. And I think the country deserves a new digital law and will get one.
And that also brings us to, these new technologies also bring us to the other very important element, which is that of skilling, which is also very much a part of what you do. How is the skilling sort of structure being able to cope, the governance on that and the creation of jobs around the new technologies which you're pushing? That's also very important for you, I'm sure, because the government is very keen on creating jobs.
Yeah. No, so if you've seen the results of the IT companies just post-COVID, just recently, you've seen that the traditional IT companies, the legacy IT companies have grown by almost 20%, 15 to 18%, depending on and this is on a huge base of almost 200 billion. So, and they are now constrained, interestingly enough, because the world is digitizing at such a fast rate, and the demand for India's services as a provider of digital products and digital services is on the up, is on the rise. That we are now finding for the first time in several years, I think, that we are constrained by skills and talent. And so some of this is, of course, not anticipating the rate at which the world is digitizing. Some of it is just natural, I think, the lag between skilling and the demand and the supply. So we are extremely focused, and the model that we are adopting in the government is very simple. We will engage with the private sector, and the government is prepared to put capital as well as infrastructural, the network. And the private sector needs to shape the skilling inventory in terms of what kind of skills they want to build out. And so it will be led by the industry, led by companies, but backstopped in some ways with capital support and infrastructural support from the government. So it's a true PPP partnership between industry and the government to address what is essentially the most important element of our journey to $1 trillion digital economy, which is the talent pool. And the Prime Minister's vision is now very clear that India, given its demography and this post-COVID reality that the world is looking for a trusted partner in the global value chains for digital products and services, is presenting to India as this huge, once in a lifetime opportunity. And I call it the Y2K moment to all of those who remember Y2K, that it is another Y2K moment for Indian industry. And so to really grab that opportunity, and this opportunity is going to be around for next 1 or 2 years. If we don't grab it, somebody else will. Skilling is the huge, in a sense, force multiplier or catalyst for this. We are very, very deeply engaged on making that happen.
Coming back to the CBDC initiative of the RBI, Minister, what is the kind of progress which you are anticipating? Because ultimately it's also based on blockchain and technology. And do you see the role of the central bank, therefore, sort of changing in that sense as CBDC is rolled out?
No, I don't see this. Look, I think if you look at the progress that we have made as a nation in the last, let's say, 6 years, we have digitized the economy significantly, and if you see the digital payments track record, that we are one of the largest nations in terms of a digital payment ecosystem and digital transactions and digitizing of the financial sector. So from where I sit in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, for me, CBDC is a natural progression of a natural evolution of the digital payment ecosystem. If you see, the digital payments side as of today is regulated by the RBI, the payments, the wallets, the payment platforms. And so it makes absolute eminent sense that the CBDC that the government the RBI issues is a continuation of that process of digitizing of the economy. So I see CBDC as really a payment platform. Where I think we square off and end up having arguments with some people is where they see the CBDC or variants of the crypto as investable assets. And I think this is where there may be amongst some startups and youngsters and the thinking of the government some divergence, because blockchain, crypto, digital payments, these are all in our sense process of digitizing the financial sector and digitizing the economy. I mean, I have read about crypto so much and I've read about Web 3.0 so much. It has always been positioned as a payment platform. But when people make it into something more than that and speculate on it and make it a volatile asset, actually they do a disservice to the whole crypto cause or the blockchain cause. So, I mean, I'm not moralizing or I'm not grandstanding on this issue, but I'm just pointing out to you that regulators and private entrepreneurs and startup innovators will always have this little gap to bridge, where the regulators and the central banks will see this as a payment, digitizing the economy roadmap, and some people see this as an investable asset with all of its volatility and speculation.
So does the volatility really, sort of become a a point of concern for the government? Because that has been an issue which the government has been worried about.
No, again, look, this is again above my pay grade, and this is all finance ministry stuff. But I would think commonsensically that if there is a asset class that lends itself to too much volatility and is being invested in by large numbers of retail investors, it becomes then the business of the regulator to intervene and smoothen out the volatility if that is volatility caused by some unforeseen, unknown, ununderstood type of causes. So I think because finally small investors, these are all in the remit of a regulator to protect. So these are, there's no answer for it now, and I clearly don't want to volunteer any answer on behalf of the Ministry of Finance. But it is clearly not an issue that will make anybody very comfortable. Extraordinary amounts of volatility that is not consistent with any normal pattern of economic behavior or justification can't be making any government comfortable, whether it's Indian or US or Western European.
Minister, you've spoken during the discussion a couple of times about user harm in terms of the disruptive new technologies. What are the key areas of concern which you see across the new technologies which we are looking at?
Oh, this will be a long conversation, because user harm today ranges from the absolutely criminal in the normal criminal penal code and the normal IPC sense, to things that are absolutely unique and new to the internet and unique to the cyberspace. Whether it is doxing, gaslighting, cyberbullying on one hand, onto identity theft, and the whole cyber hacking your wallets on the other hand. So it is a huge canvas of probable user harm. And I think some of them we understand today, and a lot of them we don't understand today. Like I was just mentioning to somebody before we started this, I spend a lot of time on the dark internet, trolling around in user groups, listening to 16-year-olds or 19-year-olds talk about how they've captured an identity or stolen a wallet and transferred crypto from one wallet to another wallet. And you'd be surprised at the technology and the capability that exists there. And so forget about the current laws. I don't think even in our understanding of our future laws, we have envisaged this. That is why I believe that the new laws should be a law that broadly defines user harm, doesn't define it precisely, but allows, as user harms are identified and are thrown up by new tools, by new innovators, for rules and rulemaking to be permitted around that in terms of how to address that.
And aside of that, cyber security is a continuing threat.
Huge,
now,
yes.
that's a huge threat for corporate sector as well, more so post-COVID as more and more companies digitize. So what is the government's thinking on addressing those areas?
So I just want to touch on one other thing before I get to cybersecurity, and in a sense they are linked. One of the things that we've learned after looking at the Ukraine-Russia incident is that the internet can also become a tool of war.
Absolutely.
And the weaponization of the internet has become something that is, at least to me personally, I'm a little disturbed by that. That the internet can be seen to be taking sides, and blockades of the internet can be imposed on one nation versus the other nation, and that, in my opinion, is extremely disturbing. And one of the things that the Prime Minister said in 2020 was this concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat. And so therefore, going back to your question about cyber security and safety and trust and secure internet, that it is clear that the goings on around the world are pointing in a certain direction where we need to build more Indian champions. We need to have a much more resilient internet topology that depends less on international. We need to minimize our dependence on international, internet networks, if you want to call it that. We need to be very careful about data localization and cross-border data flows. So there are many issues that are issues of principle that have arisen as a consequence of what we are seeing and observing today. And one big area for me is the fact that intermediaries, especially big tech, who have gained so much from the internet, and who have constantly railed against the government, whether it's Indian government or any other government, have done so little on the issue of safety on the internet, and on whether it's cyber hacking or it is cyber incidents. So I think that area is a very important focus area. We are building up our capacities and tools. Of course, we have significant capacities and tools within the government, but we are also exploring the need for more permanent global rule making, which is because on the internet, the criminal, the crime, and the victim are almost always or very often in 3 different jurisdictions. True. And therefore, there is no one law that can capture the entire chain of the event or the incident. So having more and more global rule making, more and more global protocols which allow countries to interact, work together, the certs of, let us say, Singapore and India, certs of India and Australia, certs of India and the US, all collaborating when there are cyber incidents. I think that is an additional feature of the model that we are hoping to develop.
But on a theoretical level, Mr. Minister, isn't internet independence in a globalized, interconnected world, in a sense, a contradiction in terms?
No, I think it's clear that there is no geographical jurisdiction for the internet, which is why you hear about cyber hacks being committed in India by somebody sitting in, let's say, country X, or cyber hacks being committed in the US by a call center in India. Because it makes it very, very difficult and unwieldy to investigate and prosecute. There are multiple legal jurisdictions, multiple police and LEOs involved in it. So that is precisely why I think a framework of global rulemaking and a framework of global cooperation is absolutely essential to make the internet safe and trusted globally. It's almost impossible for one country and one government to do it on its own.
So it's been a fascinating conversation, Mr. Chandrasekhar, and it could go on and on, as we just said. But if there are any questions quickly from the audience, we can just take one or two and then maybe just wind up, because we're running out of time completely. So I think they're convinced by your pretty forceful arguments on the new technology and disruptive technology. Yes, please. Just the last question then. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a long, hectic, educative program for us in the crypto conclave, sir. What we have learned that there are multiple cryptocurrencies. My question to the minister, honorable minister, is that why not to recognize some of the cryptocurrencies by the government of India according to their brand values, so that the people who are investing, whether it's a younger lot or anybody, it's gain of employment to the government of India. So why not to have certain brand which can be governed, and you give them some sort of incentives that these are the brands which will be taken later on as the cryptocurrencies from our side. Is that possible, sir?
Yeah, so the first brand that the government of India will encourage you to invest in is called the digital rupee. And we issued by the central bank, the RBI. So feel free to invest in that when that happens. In terms of whether other brands should be allowed, the private sector issuers of crypto, I think that is the consultation that is underway on the crypto policy, and the finance minister has said that on more than one occasion. And I think that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandrasekhar. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much
sir.
for,
Thank
for
you for having
sharing
me.
your
Thank
thoughts.
you.
Thank you. Big round of applause for the minister.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.